Either you move into the nursing home, or you sleep in the dog kennel tonight. Your choice. My daughter-in-law's voice cut through the Thanksgiving night like a knife, shrill, sharp, unforgiving. She slammed the admission papers onto the wooden table so hard they practically echoed. My son sat there in silence, eyes fixed on nothing, saying absolutely nothing. I didn't cry. I simply smiled and walked toward the phone. I had one call to make, a call that would change everything. My daughter-in-law had no idea that in just 30 minutes, when the person I called knocked on that door, her arrogance would crumble to dust. And all she'd be able to do was tremble and beg, "Mom, please, I was wrong. Don't do this." My name is Evelyn Vance. I'm 62 years old. That night, outside the window, a blizzard tore through Chicago. But inside me, there was another storm, a storm that had been building for 10 long years. The storm of a woman finally done being invisible in her own home. I remember the weather forecaster predicting a snowstorm on Thanksgiving Day, but the family dinner still took place. "Eat up, Mom. It's Campbell's." Mark, my son, muttered. He kept his head down, cutting his turkey into microscopic pieces. He was trying to make himself invisible. I picked up my spoon. My hand trembled, not from age, but from a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "I'm not hungry," I said softly. Across the table, Jessica, my daughter-in-law, sighed. It was a loud, theatrical sound. She dropped her fork onto the ceramic plate. She wiped her mouth, smearing her bright red lipstick. She didn't look like family. She looked like a predator who was finally bored with playing with its food. "Look, Evelyn," she began. She never called me Mom. "We need to talk about the living arrangements." My heart gave a painful thud. I gripped the table edge. Jessica reached under her chair and slapped a glossy brochure onto the table. It slid across the wood and stopped next to my cold soup. Oak Creek State Assisted Living Facility. I knew that place. Everyone did. It was a warehouse for the elderly. A place the state funded for people with no money and no family who cared. It smelled of bleach and despair. "What is this?" I asked. "Your new home," Jessica said, swirling her cheap Chardonnay. "Effective Monday." I looked at Mark. My son, the boy I had protected my whole life. "Mark?" He flinched. He looked at the plastic pumpkin centerpiece, anywhere but at me. "Mom, look. The bills are piling up. The heating cost is insane. Jess needs the bedroom for her online boutique. We need space." "Space?" I repeated. "This house has 4 bedrooms. I only occupy one." "That's the problem," Jessica cut in, her voice sharp. "I need a studio for my live streams. I can't keep inventory in the damp garage." She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "So, here is the deal. I've filled out the paperwork for Oak Creek. The state pays since you have no income." She tapped a manicured nail on the brochure. "Tap, tap, tap. You have 2 choices, Evelyn. Either you go to Oak Creek, or you sleep in the utility room." "The utility room?" I whispered. "With the dog?" "It's warm enough if you use extra blankets," she shrugged. "Honestly, it's better than you deserve. You don't contribute a dime here." Silence. Suffocating silence. I waited for Mark to slam his fist. I waited for him to shout, "That is my mother." But Mark just chewed his lip. "Mom, it's just temporary. Maybe you should consider the facility. They have doctors." Something inside me broke. It was quiet, like a dry twig snapping under heavy snow. Memories flashed. 10 years ago, Mark said, "Mom, sign the deed to me to avoid taxes." I signed. 5 years ago, "Mom, I need your savings for my startup." I wrote the check. 2 years ago, they lost their condo. I opened my doors. I looked at my son. A spineless hollow shell. My love had been poison. By giving him everything, I had taught him I was nothing. The pain turned to ice. A cold, hard clarity washed over me. I didn't cry. Jessica was watching, waiting for the tears. She wanted me to beg. She wanted content for her gossip. I wouldn't give her that. I sat up straight. My spine felt like a steel rod. I dabbed my mouth with the napkin. Then, I smiled. "Okay," I said. My voice was steady. Jessica blinked. The smug grin faltered. "Okay, what?" "Okay," I repeated. "I choose the nursing home." "You're right." I shouldn't take up space for your business. Mark let out a breath. Really, Mom? You think that's best? Absolutely. I'll start packing. I stood up, smoothing my faded cardigan. I'm done with dinner. Thank you for the soup. It was enlightening. I turned my back. I heard Jessica snort. Finally. She knows her place. I walked into the dark kitchen. On the wall hung the old rotary phone. Jessica hated it, but I had kept it for emergencies. This was an emergency. I lifted the receiver. The dial tone hummed, a sound from a past life. I dialed a number I had memorized 30 years ago, a private line. Behind me they were toasting with wine, celebrating their victory. They thought they had discarded the trash. The line connected. Click. James Sterling, a deep voice answered. Who is calling on Thanksgiving? I watched the snow swirling against the window. Hello, James, I said. It's Evelyn. I'm ready to come home. I hung up gently. Let them enjoy their wine. Because tomorrow, everything changes. I didn't take much. Back in my bedroom, I pulled my old leather suitcase from under the bed. It smelled of lavender sachets and years of disuse. I packed 2 wool sweaters, a comfortable pair of slacks, and the small jewelry box that held my wedding ring. That was it. I left the rest. I left the furniture I had paid for. I left the curtains I had sewn by hand. I left the memories. Jessica leaned against the doorframe, watching me. She was still holding her wine glass, her lips stained a dark, predatory purple. Make sure you don't pack any of the towels, she said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. Those belong to the house. And the house belongs to us. I didn't look at her. I simply zipped the suitcase. Zip. The sound was final. Don't worry, Jessica, I said calmly. I'm not taking anything you'd want. I walked past her, out into the living room. Mark was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands. He looked up as I approached, his eyes red. Guilt? Maybe. Relief? Definitely. Mom, he started, his voice cracking. The van from the facility, they said they could send someone tomorrow. You don't have to go tonight. The storm. The ride is already here. I cut him off. I checked my wristwatch. 30 minutes exactly since I hung up the phone. Thud. 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 3 knocks echoed from the front door. Not the tentative tap of a neighbor borrowing sugar, not the polite knock of a delivery driver. These were 3 heavy, authoritative strikes. It sounded like a judge's gavel hitting the bench. Mark jumped. Who is that? It's a blizzard out there. Go open it, Jessica commanded, walking into the living room. It's probably the transport service. Finally, Mark shuffled to the door. He unlocked the deadbolt and pulled it open. A gust of icy wind and snow blew into the hallway, swirling around his ankles. But Mark didn't move. He stood frozen in the doorway, blocking my view. His mouth hung open slightly. Can I help you? Mark stammered. Step aside, son. The voice was baritone, smooth, and cultured. A voice that commanded attention without ever raising its volume. Mark stepped back, stumbling slightly. 2 men in black trench coats stepped into the foyer first. They were huge, built like linebackers, with earpieces coiled behind their ears. They scanned the room with professional indifference. Then, he walked in. James Sterling. He was 70 years old, but he stood taller than my son. He wore a charcoal wool coat over a bespoke suit that cost more than Mark's car. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, defying the wind outside. He held a black umbrella, shaking off the snow with a sharp, elegant snap. Behind him, through the open door, the driveway was no longer empty. A massive car was idling there. It wasn't a van from the nursing home. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, jet black, gleaming under the porch lights like a dark beast. Its engine purred so softly it was almost silent. The Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament stood proud against the falling snow. Jessica dropped her wine glass. It hit the rug with a dull thud, staining the beige fibers red. She didn't notice. Her eyes were glued to the car, then to James. The greed and confusion on her face were grotesque. Who are you? Jessica demanded, her voice rising an octave. She tried to regain her composure, stepping in front of Mark. Are you the driver for the nursing home? You're late. And why are you driving? At that. James didn't look at her. He didn't even acknowledge her existence. His steel gray eyes swept the room until they found me. His expression softened instantly. He removed his leather gloves, tucking them into his pocket. "Evelyn," he said warmly. He walked past Mark and Jessica as if they were furniture. He stopped in front of me and bowed his head slightly. "I apologize for the delay. The roads are dreadful." "Hello, James," I said. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "You made good time." "For you?" "Always." He reached out and took the battered suitcase from my hand. "Allow me." He signaled to one of the bodyguards. The large man stepped forward, taking the bag from James with reverence, then retreated to the car. Mark finally found his voice. "Wait a minute. Wait just a minute." He looked from the Rolls-Royce to James, and then to me. His face was pale. "Mom? You know this guy. Who is he?" James turned. He looked at Mark. He didn't look at him with anger. He looked at him with something far worse. Disappointment. "I am James Sterling," he said. "Your father's attorney. And his oldest friend." "Dad's attorney?" Mark blinked. Dad didn't have an attorney. Dad was a contractor. He didn't leave anything. "That," James said, his voice dropping to a chilly register, "is what your mother wanted you to believe. She wanted you to build your own life. To stand on your own 2 feet. James looked around the shabby living room, at the peeling paint, and finally at the brochure for the state nursing home lying on the table. "It seems," James continued, "that her investment in you was unwise." Jessica bristled. "Hey, you can't talk to us like that in our own house. I don't care who you are. If you're taking her to the nursing home, just go." James let out a short, dry laugh. It had no humor in it. "Nursing home?" He turned back to me, offering his arm. "Shall we go, Mrs. Vance? The car is heated." I took his arm. The fabric of his coat felt expensive, solid, secure. "Yes, James, I'm ready." We began to walk toward the door. "Wait!" Mark shouted. He ran out onto the porch, ignoring the snow soaking his socks. "Mom, where are you going? Where is he taking you?" James stopped on the top step. He turned halfway around. The wind whipped his coat, making him look like a dark angel of judgment. "I am taking the lady home," James said. "Home?" Mark yelled over the wind. "What home? We are her home." James looked at Mark. He looked at the house. Then he looked at Jessica, who was shivering in the doorway, hugging her arms. "No, young man," James said. "You were her burden. Now, she is going to a place where ungrateful people like you are never permitted to set foot." One of the bodyguards opened the rear door of the Rolls-Royce. The interior glowed with warm amber light. I saw soft leather seats and a crystal decanter. I stepped down from the porch. "Mom!" Mark cried out again. "Mom, look at me!" I paused. My hand rested on the car door. For a second, I thought about turning around. I thought about the 40 years I had spent in that house. I thought about Mark's first steps on that porch. I thought about the soup I had made him when he was sick. But then I remembered the cold soup from tonight. I remembered the brochure. I remembered the utility room. I didn't turn my head. I didn't look back. I slid into the car. The warmth enveloped me instantly, smelling of cedar and leather. James got in beside me. The heavy door closed with a solid thump, shutting out the wind, the snow, and the sun I had lost. "To the penthouse, Parker," James said to the driver. "Yes, sir." The car began to move. I watched through the tinted window as the house drifted away. I saw Mark standing in the driveway, small and shrinking, illuminated by the red glow of the taillights. He looked like a child who had just realized he let go of a balloon he could never get back. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. "Are you all right, Evelyn?" James asked softly. I opened my eyes. For the first time in years, the knot in my chest was gone. "I don't know yet, James," I whispered. "But I think I'm going to be." The interior of the car was a sanctuary. It was quiet. Absolute silence, save for the rhythmic swish of the wipers battling the snow. The leather seat was warm beneath me, a stark contrast to the wooden chair I had occupied just an hour ago. I watched the city lights blur past the tinted window. We were heading downtown, away from the quiet, suffocating suburbs. "Here," James said gently. He handed me a bottle of water. I took a sip. My throat was dry, parched from holding back words I should have screamed years ago. "You knew," I said. "It wasn't a question." James nodded. He sat across from me, his legs crossed, reviewing a file on his tablet. Robert knew. Evelyn, he always said you were too soft on the boy. Robert. My husband. To the neighbors, Robert was a hard-working general contractor. A man with calloused hands and sawdust on his boots. But they didn't know the other side of him. They didn't know that for every house he built, he bought 2 plots of land. They didn't know he studied the market with the precision of a hawk. Robert wasn't just a builder, he was a silent tycoon. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I could smell his Old Spice cologne. I remembered the night before he passed. He had handed me a thick binder. Evelyn, he had wheezed, clutching my hand. This is the trust. It activates the moment I'm gone. But listen to me, don't tell Mark. Not yet. Let him walk on his own feet. If you give a man a crutch before he's lame, he'll never learn to run, I had promised him. So, for 10 years, I lived simply. I lived on my small pension. I let the millions sit in the dark, growing, accumulating interest under James's watchful eye. I wanted Mark to struggle, just a little. I wanted him to learn the value of $1, the pride of earning a living. But I made a mistake. I confused struggle with suffering. Every time Mark stumbled, I was there to catch him. Not with the trust money, but with my own safety net. My house. My savings. My labor. I thought I was being a good mother. I thought sacrifice was the highest form of love. I opened my eyes and looked at the city skyline approaching. The skyscrapers pierced the night sky, defiant against the storm. I failed him, James, I whispered. I didn't let him grow up. I just fed his entitlement. You loved him, James corrected. There is no crime in that. Yes, there is, I said, my voice hardening. Love without boundaries is a poison. I see that now. I created a monster who thinks he can trade his mother for a spare room. James tapped his tablet. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a blue folder. He placed it on the seat between us. Speaking of boundaries, James said, his tone shifting to professional briskness. We need to discuss the asset portfolio. Specifically, the property at 42 Elm Street. My old house. The house I had just left. Mark owns it, I said bitterly. I signed the deed over to him 10 years ago. To avoid taxes. James raised an eyebrow. Technically, yes. He is on the deed. But he is not the owner. Not anymore. I looked at the folder. What do you mean? 6 months ago, James explained, Mark's business took a severe hit. To cover his gambling debts, his investment losses, he took out a second mortgage on the house. He borrowed against the equity. Heavily. I felt a cold shiver. He mortgaged the house? My house? He did. And he stopped paying 3 months ago. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings. I stared at James. The image of Jessica bragging about her house flashed in my mind. The irony was sickening. They were living in a house they had already lost. I didn't know, I murmured. You weren't supposed to, James said. But as the trustee of your estate, I monitor all family-related assets. When the foreclosure notice hit the public record, I intervened. I used the trust funds to purchase the distressed debt from the bank. James leaned forward, his eyes intense. The bank doesn't own the mortgage anymore, Evelyn. The trust does. You do. I reached out and touched the blue folder. My fingers traced the edge of the paper. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Mark wasn't kicking me out of his house. He was kicking me out of a house that I held the note on. I was his creditor. I held the power to foreclose. I held the power to evict. I could have wiped the debt, I whispered to myself. I could have signed a paper and saved them. That was my original instruction, James admitted. I had the forgiveness papers drawn up. I was going to present them to you next week as a surprise. I thought. Well, I thought they were taking care of you. He looked out the window, his jaw tightening. After what I saw tonight. I did not bring those papers. The car slowed down. We turned into a circular driveway of a massive glass tower in the heart of the Gold Coast district. A doorman in a long coat rushed to open the door. We have arrived, James said. The penthouse is prepared. The staff has been notified. I stepped out of the car. The city air was crisp, smelling of snow and exhaust, but it felt clean. I looked up. The building seemed to touch the clouds. James, I said, standing on the pavement. Yes, Evelyn? Keep the debt, I said. James stopped. He turned to look at me, a faint smile playing on his lips. I beg your pardon. Keep the debt active, I repeated. My voice was no longer the voice of a tired old woman. It was the voice of Robert's wife. Don't tell them. Not yet. Let them think they got away with it. Let them think they won. And then? James asked. I thought about the brochure for the nursing home. I thought about the cold soup. I thought about the utility room where they wanted me to sleep next to the dog. They wanted me to learn my place, I said, stepping into the warm, golden light of the lobby. So I think it is time I teach them theirs. I want to teach them a lesson that life hasn't managed to teach them yet. James chuckled. It was a genuine sound this time. I believe Robert would have enjoyed this. I walked toward the elevator. The doors opened with a smooth chime. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? Have you ever felt that you've given so much of yourself that there is nothing left, and yet, it still isn't enough? If you understand this pain, if you know what it's like to be invisible to the people you love, please, leave a comment below. Tell me I'm not alone. I sat in a leather armchair that cost more than my son's car. My hands were wrapped around a mug of hot chamomile tea. The steam rose in the quiet air of the penthouse living room. But my eyes weren't on the breathtaking view of the Chicago skyline at night. They were glued to the screen of my iPad. James had installed the app for me. Surveillance, he had called it. I called it a reality show. A very disappointing reality show. On the screen, a grainy black and white feed showed the interior of my old house. Specifically, my old bedroom. I watched them. Mark and Jessica were there. They hadn't even waited for the snow to stop falling before they started picking over the carcass of my life. Jessica was tearing through my closet. She pulled out my wool coats, my Sunday dresses, and tossed them onto the floor like garbage. She wasn't looking for memories, she was looking for value. She was looking for cash I might have hidden in a pocket, or jewelry I might have left behind. Check the mattress. I heard Jessica's voice tinny and distorted through the iPad speaker. Old people always hide cash under the mattress. It's a Depression-era thing. Mark hesitated. He was standing near the dresser, holding a framed photo of his father. For a second, I thought he might cry. I thought he might feel a pang of regret. But then Jessica snapped her fingers. Mark! Focus. If we find enough loose cash, we can upgrade the sound system for the studio. Mark put the photo down. Face down. He walked over to my bed. He lifted the heavy mattress. I took a sip of tea. Here it comes. I had left it there on purpose. James and I had planted it. It was a thick manila envelope, taped securely to the underside of the box spring. It looked secret. It looked important. Jackpot, Mark shouted. He ripped the envelope free. Jessica abandoned the pile of clothes and rushed over. They sat on the edge of the bed, my bed, like two vultures fighting over a bone. Mark tore the envelope open. He pulled out the documents inside. These weren't real bank statements. Not exactly. They were annual portfolio summaries from a fictional holding company James had created, but the numbers were real enough to make anyone dizzy. They listed stocks, bonds, and dividends from the Robert Vance estate. The total at the bottom of the page was 7 figures. I watched their faces. Jessica's eyes went wide. She grabbed the paper from Mark's hand, scanning it frantically. Her mouth moved as she read the numbers. "Oh my God," she whispered. The microphone picked it up clearly. "Oh my God, Mark. Look at this. Beneficiary, Evelyn Vance. Mark, look at these dates. These are recent." Mark stared at the paper. Dad? Dad had millions? But he drove a Ford truck. He was hiding it. Jessica shrieked. Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was euphoric. It was the sound of a woman who just won the lottery without buying a ticket. That sneaky old. I mean, your father was a genius. She pulled out her phone. She opened the calculator app. I could see her thumbs flying across the screen, calculating interest, calculating taxes, calculating her cut. "We're rich," Mark mumbled. "Jess, we're rich." "Not yet," Jessica said sharply. She stopped tapping. The smile vanished from her face. A look of pure, cold panic replaced it. "Wait," she said. She grabbed Mark's arm, digging her nails into his sweater. "Mark, listen to me. Who is the beneficiary?" "Mom," Mark said. "It says Evelyn Vance." "Exactly," Jessica hissed. "Your mother. She owns this. All of it. So. She's family, usually. You idiot. Jessica stood up, pacing the small room. She kicked my favorite sweater out of the way. She just left with a lawyer. A lawyer in a Rolls-Royce. Do you know what that means? It means she has legal counsel. She spun around and pointed a finger at Mark. If she dies without a will, the state steps in. Or worse, if that lawyer convinces her to sign everything over to charity, or to a cat shelter. Jessica's face twisted in horror. The thought of losing the money terrified her far more than the thought of losing me ever did. We have to get her back, Jessica declared. What? Mark blinked. But you said. Forget what I said, she screamed. That was before I knew she was a walking ATM. Mark, you have to fix this. Right now. If she changes her will, we get nothing. Zero. We'll be paying off your gambling debts for the rest of our lives. I watched them on the screen. It was comical. It was tragic. Jessica, who had just told me to sleep with the dog, was now frantic to get me back. Not because she loved me, but because she loved the numbers on that piece of paper. Call her, Jessica commanded. Call her right now. Cry if you have to. Tell her we were just stressed. Tell her it was the wine. Tell her we love her. Mark fumbled for his phone. My iPhone, sitting on the marble coffee table beside me, lit up. Buzz. Buzz. Caller ID, Mark. I let it ring. I took another sip of tea. I watched the screen. Mark was pacing, holding the phone to his ear, looking terrified. Jessica was mouthing words to him, coaching him like a director on a movie set. Look sad, sound pathetic. I let it go to voicemail. On the iPad, Mark lowered the phone. She didn't answer. Text her, Jessica yelled. Send her a picture of the dog. Old ladies love the dog. Tell her, Buster misses her. My phone buzzed again. Ping. Message from Mark. Mom, please pick up. We're so worried. It's snowing so hard. Are you safe? Ping. Message from Mark. We didn't mean it. We were just overwhelmed. Please come home. We love you. I stared at the messages. We love you. 3 words. Easy to type. Impossible to prove. I picked up the phone. I didn't text back, I dialed. On the iPad, I saw Mark jump as his phone rang. He looked at Jessica. She gave him 2 thumbs up and made a keep-it-together face. Mark answered. Mom? Mom, oh thank God. His voice was thick with fake emotion. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. Hello Mark, I said. My voice was calm, detached. Mom, where are you? Mark stammered. That man. He took you away. We were so scared. We didn't mean what we said. You know Jess, she just gets anxious. Please Mom. Come back. The roads are dangerous. I swirled the tea in my mug. I am safe, Mark, I said. I am staying with a friend. A friend? Jessica's voice cut in. She must have been listening on speaker. Oh, Evelyn, we are so relieved. Look, why don't you come home tomorrow? We can clear out the spare room properly. We'll make it nice. We can be a family again. I paused. I needed to play this perfectly. I needed to dangle the carrot just out of reach. I don't know, I said slowly, sounding hesitant. I have been thinking about my future. About my assets. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. I had used the magic word. Assets? Mark asked, his voice trembling with greed. What do you mean, Mom? I have some paperwork to sort out, I said. James, my lawyer. He thinks I should update my estate plan. Since I am moving into the nursing home, I might not need all these investments your father left. No! Jessica shouted. Then she quickly lowered her voice. I mean. No, don't be hasty, Evelyn. You shouldn't make big decisions when you're upset. You need family advice. Maybe you're right, I sighed. I am feeling a bit confused with all these numbers. We can help, Mark said eagerly. We can help you sort it out. We're your family, Mom. We're the only ones you can trust. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. All right, I said. I am willing to talk. But not at the house. I don't want to argue again. Anywhere, Mark said. Just name the place. Come to James Sterling's office tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock sharp. He is drafting the new will. I want you both there to review it. We'll be there. Jessica practically cheered. 10 o'clock. We love you, Mom. Sleep tight. I hung up. On the iPad screen, I saw them high-five. Jessica actually did a little victory dance, spinning around in my bedroom. We got her. Jessica laughed. She's bringing the will. We just need to go there, play nice, apologize, and get her to sign everything over to us. Then we can stick her in the nursing home next month. Yeah, Mark grinned. Dad's money. It's finally ours. I closed the iPad cover. The screen went black, shutting off their celebration. I sat there in the silence of the penthouse. They thought they were walking into a payday. They had no idea they were walking into a courtroom. They thought they were the hunters. I finished my tea. It was still warm. See you tomorrow, children, I whispered to the empty room. The elevator ride took 40 seconds. I watched the floor numbers climb on the digital display. 10, 20, 30, 40. Mark and Jessica stood in the lobby of Sterling and Partners. They looked like tourists who had accidentally wandered into a cathedral. They had dressed up for the occasion. Mark was wearing his funeral suit, the navy blue one that was a size too tight around the waist. Jessica wore a dress that she probably considered sophisticated, a floral print that was too loud for a law firm, paired with oversized sunglasses she wore indoors. James led them into the conference room. It was a corner office with floor-to-ceiling glass. The entire city of Chicago lay beneath us, a grid of snow and steel. But Mark and Jessica didn't look at the view. They looked at the mahogany table. They looked at the leather chairs. They looked at the smell of money. I was already seated at the head of the table. I wasn't wearing my faded cardigan. James had arranged for a personal shopper earlier that morning. I wore a tailored cream blazer, a silk blouse, and pearl earrings that Robert had given me on our 25th anniversary. When they walked in, they stopped dead. Mom? Mark whispered. He looked confused. He was looking for the frail old woman who ate cold soup. She wasn't here. Sit down, I said. My voice was calm. It didn't waver. They sat. Jessica placed her designer knockoff handbag on the table, trying to look comfortable. She failed. She shifted in her seat, her eyes darting around the room, calculating the cost of the furniture. Evelyn, Jessica started, her voice dropping to a saccharine whisper. You look expensive. I mean, healthy. We were so worried about you. She reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I didn't move my hand. I left it resting on the leather folio in front of me. Jessica's hand hovered in the air for a second, then retreated awkwardly. We need to talk about last night, Jessica continued, undeterred. I was just hysterical. You know how stress gets to me. The business, the debts. I said things I didn't mean. Mark didn't mean them either. Right, Mark? She kicked Mark under the table. I saw his shoulder jerk. Yeah, Mark stammered. Yeah, Mom. We love you. We just want you home. The house isn't the same without you. I looked at my son. He was sweating. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he might lose the lottery ticket he just found. I watched their performance like a critic watching a bad high school play. It was pathetic. I understand, I said softly. Their faces lit up. They thought it was working. They thought I was the same pushover Evelyn. Stress does terrible things to people, I added. It makes them reveal who they truly are. The smile on Jessica's face froze. Excuse me? I asked James to bring you here, I said, ignoring her question, because I am making some changes. Significant changes. I opened the folio. I pretended to read a document. Your father left a trust, I said. A substantial one. For years, I kept it dormant. I wanted you to build your own character, but now, given the current financial situation, I am considering activating the full assets. Mark's eyes practically bulged out of his head. Activating? You mean the millions? Yes, I said. However, managing such a portfolio requires skill. It requires stewardship. I am old, as you reminded me. I need to appoint a successor to manage the funds if I retire. Jessica sat up straight. She smoothed her hair. She looked like a shark smelling blood in the water. Mom, Jessica said, suddenly calling me Mom, for the first time in 10 years. You need family. You can't trust these lawyers. They just want fees. Mark and we are good with money. Well, I am. I run a business, remember? She runs a business selling cheap trinkets online that loses money every month. But I didn't say that. I am considering that option, I nodded slowly. I am considering handing over the management of the trust to you. Mark grabbed Jessica's hand. They squeezed each other so hard their knuckles turned white. They were already spending the money in their heads. Really? Mark breathed. But, I raised a finger. I need to be sure. I need to make a formal announcement. I turned to James. He was standing by the window, silent as a statue. James, I said, is the venue available for Saturday? It is, Mrs. Vance, James replied smoothly. I looked back at my children. This Saturday evening, I said. I am hosting a dinner party. A gala, really. I have invited some of your father's old associates, some investors, and the board members of the trust. It will be a night of reconciliation. A party? Jessica asked, her eyes glittering. A rich people party? Yes, I smiled. A thin, cold smile. And at this party, I will make a public announcement regarding the future of the trust. And the future of the house. We'll be there. Jessica nearly shouted. What should we wear? Black tie? We need to look the part if we are going to be, you know, the heirs. Wear your best, I said. It will be a night everyone remembers. We won't let you down, Mom, Mark promised. We'll make you proud. I'm sure you will, I said. Now, you may go. I have documents to review with my attorney. They stood up. They practically floated out of the room. They didn't even look back at me. They were too busy whispering to each other. Did you hear that? I heard Jessica hiss as the glass door closed. The future of the trust. We're in, Mark. We did it. I watched them enter the elevator. The doors slid shut, sealing their fate. I turned my chair to look out the window. The snow had stopped. The city looked clean, white, and sharp. They took the bait, James said quietly. Hook, line, and sinker, I replied. Mark and Jessica didn't go home. James's private investigator sent me the credit card alerts an hour later. They went straight to the jagged edge of their credit limit. First stop, the Porsche dealership on Limitless W Grand Avenue. They didn't buy a car, they couldn't get a loan that fast. But they put down a non-refundable deposit of $5,000 on a lease for a Cayenne. Put it on a credit card they had maxed out months ago, probably asking for an emergency limit increase. Second stop, a travel agency. 2 first-class tickets to the Maldives for next month. Celebration trip, Jessica had posted on her Instagram story, along with a picture of the brochure. Caption, number blessed. Number, new chapter. Number, air life. Third stop, the Magnificent Mile. Jessica bought a gown, a sequined, backless thing that cost more than my annual grocery budget. Mark bought a tuxedo. They were spending money they didn't have, banking on a windfall that didn't exist. They were digging a hole so deep that when the ladder was pulled away, they would never climb out. I scrolled through Jessica's social media feed on my iPad. She had posted a selfie in the dealership. Big things coming. Patience pays off. Family is everything. I liked the photo. It was the first time I had ever engaged with her social media. Let them celebrate. Let them dance on the edge of the cliff. It will only make the fall that much longer. When I tell this part of the story, I ask myself, what is the limit of a mother's endurance? We are taught that a mother's love is unconditional, that we must be the soil so our children can be the flowers. But what happens when the flower is poisonous? What happens when the soil is depleted, dry, and crumbling? Do we keep giving until we turn to dust? Or do we finally realize that we matter too? If you were in my shoes, sitting in that high-rise office, would you have signed the papers? Would you have forgiven them and hoped for the best? Or would you have done what I am about to do? I would love to hear your advice. 3 days. I gave them 3 days. 72 hours is a long time. In the Bible, it is enough time for a resurrection. In my life, it was enough time for a final death. The death of hope. I spent those 3 days inside the penthouse. I didn't go out. I didn't answer the phone. I sat in the high-backed leather chair in James's library, surrounded by silence and expensive mahogany. But I wasn't idle. On the desk in front of me lay a stack of manila envelopes. They were reports from the private investigator James had hired. A man named Miller. Expensive. Discreet, efficient, I opened the first envelope. It contained a transcript and a USB drive. The label read, Subject, Jessica Vance. Location, the Bean and Leaf Cafe. Thursday, 11 a.m. I plugged the drive into my laptop. I put on my headphones. The audio crackled to life. I heard the clinking of porcelain cups, the hiss of an espresso machine. And then, her voice. You should see the old hag. Jessica's voice was sharp, cutting through the background noise. She thinks she's royalty now. Suddenly she has a lawyer and a blazer. So, what's the plan? Another woman asked. Probably one of her friends from the yoga studio. The plan is simple, Jessica laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. I play the dutiful daughter-in-law for a week, maybe 2. I bake some cookies. I kiss her wrinkly cheek. Then, the moment she signs over the trust management to us. Boom. Boom? We put her right back where she belongs, Jessica said. Oak Creek, or maybe somewhere cheaper if I can find it. I'm not spending my millions on her medical bills. She's had her life. It's my turn. I pressed pause. I took off the headphones. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't stressed. She was calculating. She viewed me as an obstacle to be removed, a toll booth on the highway to her fortune. I looked at the transcript. I picked up a red pen. I underlined the phrase, my millions. I pushed that file aside and opened the second envelope. Subject, Mark Vance. I hoped, foolishly, that this one would be better. I hoped my son was just a victim of a bad marriage. I hoped he was just weak, not wicked. I pulled out the photos. They were grainy, taken with a long-range lens. But the neon sign in the background was unmistakable. The Horseshoe Casino. I flipped through them. Mark at the blackjack table, Mark at the cashier, handing over a stack of cash. Mark with his head in his hands in the parking lot. James walked into the library. He saw the photos spread out on the desk. We checked the financials, Evelyn, James said softly. The business investment he lost last year? There was no business. There was no inventory. There was no market crash. It was the tables, I whispered. Roulette and blackjack, James confirmed. He has a problem, Evelyn. A serious one. And he was planning to use your trust fund to pay off the loan sharks. I picked up the photo of my son. He looked so much like his father. The same jawline, the same eyes. But Robert had eyes of steel. Mark had eyes of glass, fragile, empty. I stood up and walked to the fireplace. On the mantel sat a small framed photo of Robert I had brought from home. You were right, I said to the photo. I traced the frame with my finger. You told me, I whispered. You said, Evelyn, if you carry him everywhere, his legs will wither. I didn't listen. I thought I was protecting him. But I was just crippling him. I turned to James. I wanted to believe he was just being manipulated by Jessica. But he's not a victim, James. He's an accomplice. Forgiveness, when the sinner feels no remorse, is not a virtue. James said, it is enabling. Yes, I nodded. It is. James handed me the final envelope. You should see this. Miller just sent it over an hour ago. I opened it. It was a brochure for a travel agency called Elite Escapes. Stapled to it was a receipt. Customer, Mark and Jessica Vance. Item, luxury yacht charter, the Golden Horizon. Destination, the Caribbean. Cost, $25,000 deposit. They don't have $25,000, I said, staring at the number. They used a credit line based on verified future inheritance, James explained. They showed the bank the fraudulent portfolio summary we gave them. They are spending your money before you are even dead. I looked at the date on the receipt. They had booked it yesterday, just hours after our meeting. While I was sitting here, mourning the loss of my family, they were picking out cocktails for a yacht. I felt something harden inside me. It was the final click of the lock. For days, I had wavered. I had thought about giving them a small allowance. I had thought about paying off the house and just leaving them alone. I had thought about mercy, but mercy is for those who stumble. Not for those who push you off a cliff and then check your pockets for change. Cancel the forgiveness papers, I said. My voice was no longer a whisper. It was flat. Final. They are already shredded, James said. Good. I walked back to the desk. I looked at the reports one last time. Then, I swept them all into the trash bin. James? Yes. Evelyn? The party on Saturday. Is everything ready? The guest list is confirmed. The board members will be there. The projection screen is set up. Add one more thing to the program, I said. I want the security camera footage from Thanksgiving night, and the audio from the cafe. I want it all queued up. James raised an eyebrow. You want to play it publicly? That is nuclear, Evelyn. They wanted a show, I said, walking towards the window to look at the cold, gray city. They wanted to be the stars of the evening. They wanted to be the heirs. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. I am going to give them exactly what they wanted. I am going to make them famous. Very well, James said. I will prepare the technical team. He left the room. I stood alone in the library. I felt a tear run down my cheek. Just one. It was hot and salty. I wiped it away furiously. That is the last tear, I said to the empty room. The last one for Mark. I thought about the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. That boy was gone. He had been consumed by the man who gambled away his mother's home. I sat down and picked up my pen. I had a speech to write. It wouldn't be a toast. It would be a eulogy. A eulogy for the relationship that died the moment they told me to sleep with a dog. The crystal chandelier hanging above the ballroom was the size of a small car. It cast a fractured, diamond-like light over the crowd. This was not a dinner at Applebee's. This was the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel. The air smelled of expensive perfume, truffle oil, and old money. I stood on the balcony, hidden by a velvet curtain, watching them. Mark and Jessica had arrived early. They looked like children playing dress-up. Jessica wore the sequined gown she had bought with a maxed-out credit card. It glittered aggressively under the lights, far too flashy for a room full of understated wool and silk. She was holding a flute of champagne, laughing too loudly at a joke made by a senator's wife. "I'm the heir," I heard Jessica say. The acoustics in the room carried her voice up to me. "My husband and I will be taking over the Vance Trust. We have big plans for the portfolio. Maybe a summer home in the Hamptons." The senator's wife smiled politely, but her eyes were cold. She knew. People in this room could smell desperation like a shark smells blood. Mark was no better. He was standing near the bar, downing scotch as if it were water. He was sweating in his new tuxedo. He kept checking his phone, probably refreshing his bank app, waiting for the millions to magically appear. James appeared beside me. "It is time, Madam Chairwoman," he said. I took a deep breath. I smoothed the lapel of my black evening gown. Tonight, I was not wearing white. Tonight, I was wearing the color of judgment. "Let's go," I said. We walked down the grand staircase. The murmur of the crowd died down as James raised his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," James announced, his voice booming without a microphone. "Please welcome the host of our evening, the chairwoman of the Robert Vance Trust, Mrs. Evelyn Vance." The applause was polite, refined. I saw Mark and Jessica's heads snap toward the staircase. Their jaws dropped. They had never seen me like this. They were used to seeing me in an apron, smelling of onions. Now, they saw a woman walking with her head high, flanked by security and legal counsel. Jessica elbowed Mark. I saw her mouth the words. "Look at her. We're going to be so rich." I walked to the podium at the front of the room. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the bankers, the investors, the charity directors, and right in the front row, standing like eager puppies, were my son and his wife. They raised their glasses to me. Jessica winked. I didn't wink back. "Thank you all for coming," I began. My voice was steady. 30 years ago, my husband Robert built a legacy. He built it with his bare hands. He wanted to create a safety net, a foundation that would ensure the future. "Here, here," Mark shouted from the front row. A few people turned to look at him, annoyed. He shrank back a little. "For the past 10 years, I continued, ignoring him, I have let this trust sit dormant. I believe that money should be earned, not given. I believe that character is built through struggle." I paused. I looked directly at Mark. But recently, I realized that I was wrong. I realized that sometimes, people need help, family needs help. Jessica gripped Mark's arm. She was practically vibrating with excitement. She thought this was the preamble to the handover. "I had prepared a document," I said, holding up a blue folder. This document was designed to transfer the full control of the Vance Trust, valued at approximately $12 million, to my only son, Mark, and his wife, Jessica. A gasp went through the room. 12 million. Jessica let out a squeal she couldn't suppress. She looked around at the guests, beaming. That's me! Her face screamed. I'm the $12 million woman. I intended to sign this tonight, I said. I intended to let them manage the legacy. I looked down at them. I saw the greed in their eyes. It was naked. It was ugly. It was the same look they had when they searched my mattress. However, I said. The word hung in the air. Heavy, sharp. 3 days ago, I said, my voice dropping an octave, I learned a painful lesson. I learned that money in the hands of those without morality is not a blessing. It is a disaster. I learned that you cannot buy love. And you certainly cannot buy gratitude. The smile on Jessica's face flickered. Mark stopped drinking his scotch. I realized, I continued, that there are people in this world who truly deserve help, people who are alone, people who have been discarded by their own families, people who are told to sleep in utility rooms because they are a burden. Jessica went pale. Her skin turned the color of ash. She recognized the words. So, I said, my voice ringing out with power I didn't know I had. I have made a new decision. Effective immediately. I ripped the blue folder in half. The sound was amplified by the microphone. It echoed through the silent ballroom. I am dissolving the family inheritance clause, I declared. I am donating 100% of the Vance Trust, every single penny, every stock, every property, to the St. Jude's Foundation for the Abandoned Elderly. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Then, from the back of the room, someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole room erupted. The bankers, the investors, the socialites, they were all applauding. They were cheering for the generosity. They were cheering for the noble cause. But in the front row, time had stopped. Mark's hand went limp. His crystal glass slipped from his fingers. The sound of shattering glass cut through the applause. The expensive scotch soaked into the plush carpet. Jessica stood frozen. Her mouth was open. Her eyes were wide, staring at the torn blue paper in my hands. She couldn't process it. The yacht, the Porsche, the mansion in the Hamptons, gone. In 1 second, the applause began to die down as people noticed the commotion in the front row. Jessica began to shake. Her face turned from pale to red. The veins in her neck bulged. The mask of the sophisticated heiress crumbled completely. No, she screamed. It was a primal shriek, a screech that didn't belong in a ballroom. You can't do that! Jessica yelled, lunging forward. 2 security guards stepped in her way instantly. She pointed a shaking finger at me. That is our money! You old witch! That is Mark's money! You promised! The crowd gasped. The polite society veneer was shattered. Guests whispered to each other, looking at the raving woman in the sequin dress. Jessica, stop, Mark hissed, trying to grab her arm. Everyone is watching. Let them watch, Jessica screamed, shoving him away. She tricked us. She made us buy the clothes. She made us come here. She's stealing our future. I stood on the podium, looking down at her. I didn't yell back. I didn't get angry. I just leaned into the microphone. I stole nothing, Jessica, I said calmly. I simply decided to spend my money on people who will treat me better than you did. Which, frankly, is a very low bar. You, Jessica stammered, incoherent with rage. I'll sue you. I'll declare you incompetent. You're senile. James stepped up to the microphone next to me. I wouldn't advise that, Mrs. Vance, James said dryly. The trust is ironclad. And as for competence, I believe Evelyn is the sharpest person in this room. Mark looked at me. He looked at the spilled scotch. He looked at the security guards. Mom? He whispered. Please. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The check has been signed, Mark, I said. It's over. I turned my back on them. I walked away from the podium as the security guards began to escort the screaming Jessica and the weeping Mark toward the exit. Get your hands off me! Jessica's voice faded as they dragged her out. Do you know who I am? I'm rich. I'm supposed to be rich. The heavy oak doors slammed shut behind them. The room was quiet again. I took a sip of water. My hand was steady. Before we move to the final act of this tragedy, I want to ask you something. We have all been disappointed by someone we loved. We have all felt the sting of betrayal. But revenge. Revenge is a heavy coat to wear. Before I reveal the final blow, the evidence that will bury them completely, leave a comment below. Just type a random number. 1, 10, 100. Just to let me know you are still here, standing with me in this ballroom. Let's finish this together. The ballroom had emptied. The applause faded. I sat in the small VIP lounge off the main hall. James stood by the door, arms crossed. We knew they hadn't left. The door burst open. Jessica didn't walk, she stormed in. Her mascara ran in black rivulets down her face, staining the sequined dress she could no longer afford. Mark trailed behind, looking like a man walking to the gallows. You, Jessica screamed, pointing a shaking finger. You sick, twisted old woman. She lunged toward the table. James stepped forward instantly, a physical wall. Jessica stopped, chest heaving. You humiliated us, she shrieked. You dragged us here, made us look like fools in front of the whole city. Why? Because I wanted my own room? Because I asked for privacy? I looked at the hatred in her eyes. It was ugly, but honest. I didn't humiliate you, Jessica, I said calmly. I just turned on the lights. You lied, Mark shouted, stepping out from behind his wife. You played us, Mom. You said you needed help. And you tried to rob your own mother, I replied. We were going to take care of you. Jessica yelled, slamming her hand on the table. We gave you a roof over your head. And this is how you repay us. By cutting us out? Mrs. Vance, James said, his voice ice cold. Lower your tone. Or I will call security. Screw you, Jessica spat. You're just a lawyer. You don't know this family. Actually, James said, I know everything. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. He placed it on the table, facing them. You claim you treated Evelyn with love, James said. Let's review the record. James tapped the screen. The video played. The audio was crystal clear. It was the kitchen, Thanksgiving night. On screen, Jessica slamming the brochure. Audio. Or sleep in the utility room, where we keep Buster's crate. Audio. It's better than you deserve. Jessica froze. She saw herself. She heard the cruelty in her own voice. That was out of context, she stammered. I was joking. James swiped the screen. A new clip played. The coffee shop. Audio. The old hag. Boom. Nursing home. I'm not spending my millions on her medical bills. Mark looked at his wife in horror. You said we would get her a private nurse. Shut up, Mark, Jessica snapped. I was venting. James swiped again. A spreadsheet appeared. The Porsche deposit, the yacht charter, the designer clothes. You spent nearly $40,000 in 3 days, James said. Money you don't have, borrowed against an inheritance that does not exist. Jessica stared at the numbers. The reality of the debt sank in. The terror crept into her eyes. You knew, she whispered. You watched us. I watched you dig your own grave, I said. I handed you the shovel, Jessica. So what? She tried to rally, voice shaking. So we have debt. Mark can file bankruptcy. We still have the house. You can't touch the house. She grabbed Mark's lapel. Right, Mark? We can sell the house. We'll be fine. I looked at James. He nodded. About the house, James said, softly. He pulled a document stamped with a red seal. Mark, James addressed my son. You took out a second mortgage 6 months ago. You defaulted 3 months ago. The bank initiated foreclosure. Mark looked at his shoes. I was going to fix it. Once the trust money came in, the bank sold the debt, James continued, to a private firm called Vance Holdings LLC. Jessica blinked. Vance Holdings? She looked at me. Then at the document. Evelyn is the sole proprietor, James said. Your mother bought your mortgage, Mark. Effectively, she is the bank. The room went silent. You own the house? Mark whispered. I do, I said. I bought it to save you. I was going to forgive the loan. I was going to rip this paper up. I paused. But then, you told me to sleep with the dog. Jessica's knees gave way. She collapsed into the chair. Because you violated the mortgage terms, James announced, and have no ability to repay, Vance Holdings is exercising its right to immediate foreclosure. He slid a paper across the table. This is an eviction notice. You have 48 hours to vacate. The locks change Tuesday at 9 a.m. 48 hours? Jessica gasped. It's winter. We have nowhere to go. You have the utility room, I said. Jessica's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Or perhaps, I continued, you can sleep in the car you just put a deposit on. If the dealership hasn't repossessed it yet. Mom, Mark fell to his knees. He crawled toward me, grabbing the hem of my gown. Mom, please. You can't do this. I'm your baby. I looked down. I didn't feel the urge to stroke his hair. I felt nothing. My son died a long time ago, I said softly. The man kneeling here is just a stranger who tried to steal from an old woman. I stood up. James. Take me home. I walked past Mark. He was sobbing, clutching the eviction notice. Evelyn. You bitch. Jessica screamed, her voice broken. You can't leave us like this. I paused at the door. I turned back one last time. By the way, I said, don't forget to feed the dog. If I find out Buster has been neglected when I take possession of the house, I will sue you for animal cruelty too. I opened the door and walked out. Behind me, the wailing of my son echoed in the hallway. It was the sound of a man who realized too late that the safety net was gone. My heels clicked rhythmically down the corridor. It was the sound of freedom. 6 months passed. The snow of Chicago melted, replaced by the gray slush of March, and finally, the timid green buds of May. In the penthouse, life was quiet, serene. I drank my tea while overlooking the lake. But silence is a conductor. It carries sound from far away. And in a city like this, news has a way of traveling. I didn't hire a detective this time. I didn't need to. The tragedy of Mark and Jessica was playing out in public, loud and messy. I heard it on Sunday mornings at the farmer's market on Division Street. I still went there myself. I liked picking my own tomatoes. There was a vendor there, Mr. Russo. He had sold fruit to our family for 20 years. He knew Mark since he was a boy stealing grapes from the display. He came by yesterday, Mrs. Vance, Mr. Russo told me, wiping his hands on his apron. He lowered his voice, respectful of my privacy but eager to share the tragedy. He looked bad. Thin. He was buying the bruised apples from the discount bin. I kept my face neutral. Did he? He talks, you know, Mr. Russo sighed. When a man has no one to talk to, he talks to the guy weighing his potatoes. Through Mr. Russo, and a few others in the neighborhood, I pieced together the collapse of their life. It was a slow-motion car crash. After the eviction, they moved into a studio apartment in a rough part of the city. Not the trendy part with the coffee shops. The part with the bars on the windows. The future inheritance was gone. But the debt remained. The credit card companies didn't care about their sob story. They garnished wages. Mark took a job at a fulfillment center, night shift. Loading boxes onto trucks for $12 an hour. His back, which used to complain about sitting in an office chair, was now breaking under the weight of manual labor. Jessica. Well, Jessica didn't handle poverty with grace. She took a job as a hostess at a chain restaurant. She hated it. She hated serving people she used to think she was better than. And without the glue of money, their marriage began to crack. Mr. Russo told me what Mark had confessed to him one rainy Tuesday. They scream at each other all night, Mark had told him. The walls are thin, the neighbors bang on the ceiling. Jessica blames me. She says I should have fought harder. She says I'm a loser. And what do you say? Mr. Russo had asked. I say nothing, Mark replied, because she's right. I am a loser. But not for the reason she thinks. The end came 2 weeks ago. It wasn't dramatic, it was transactional. Just like Jessica, she met a man at the restaurant. A divorced car dealership owner. He wasn't particularly kind or handsome, but he drove a Mercedes and he had a condo in the Loop. Jessica packed her bags while Mark was at work. She didn't leave a note, she just sent a text. I can't live like this. I deserve better. Don't look for me. That was it. 10 years of marriage. Dissolved the moment the ATM stopped dispensing cash. Mark was alone. He was sitting in an empty apartment, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, ironically, much like the utility room they had offered me. He cried right here, Mr. Russo told me, pointing to a crate of onions. A grown man, Mrs. Vance. He said. He said he missed the soup. My hand froze over a bell pepper. The soup? The clam chowder. Mr. Russo nodded. He said, Mr. Russo, I treated my mother like a servant. I threw away the only person who ever loved me for a woman who only loved my wallet. He said he was cold. And he wasn't talking about the weather. I paid for my vegetables. I walked back to the car. My driver opened the door, but I stood there for a moment, looking at the city. Karma is not a vengeful god. It is simply a mirror. It reflects exactly what you put in front of it. That evening, the console in my entryway beeped. Motion detected, main entrance. I walked over to the security monitor. It was a high-resolution screen, much clearer than the old iPad setup. I saw him. Mark stood on the sidewalk outside the glass doors of my building. He looked older than his 30 years. His shoulders were slumped. He wore a cheap windbreaker that was too thin for the evening chill. His hair was messy, uncombed. He looked up at the building. He couldn't see me, 40 floors up. But I saw him. I saw the hesitation in his hands. He reached for the intercom button. His finger hovered over it. I held my breath. If he rang, what would I do? Would I buzz him in? Would I let him come up and cry on my expensive rug? Would I fix him a sandwich? My finger hovered over the talk button, but he didn't ring. He pulled his hand back. He shook his head slowly. He looked down at his shoes, worn-out sneakers that had seen better days. He knew he hadn't earned the right to ring that bell. He knew that an apology demanded simply to relieve his own guilt was just another form of selfishness. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He didn't try to slide it under the door. He didn't tape it to the glass. He simply placed it on the small stone ledge near the intercom. He placed it gently, with reverence. Then, he stepped back. He looked up one last time. I could see his lips move. I couldn't hear him, but I read the syllables. I'm sorry. He turned around. He walked away into the city night. He walked with a heavy step, the walk of a man carrying a burden he created himself. I watched him until he disappeared around the corner. I didn't go down. I didn't send the doorman to get him. I stood there in the silence of the penthouse. My heart ached. Of course it did. I am a mother. Every fiber of my biology screamed at me to run downstairs, to wrap him in a blanket, to tell him everything would be okay. But I stayed still. Because if I ran down there now, I would rob him of the most important lesson of his life. I would be the crutch again, and he needed to learn how to walk. Even if he had to walk alone in the dark for a while. Good night, Mark, I whispered to the screen. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. The water boiled, the whistle blew. It was a lonely sound. But it was a clean sound. The envelope felt heavy in my hand. It wasn't heavy with paper. It was heavy with the weight of the words inside. I had retrieved it from the ledge downstairs early that morning, before the city fully woke up. I sat at my kitchen island, opening it with a silver letter opener. My hands were steady. The handwriting was messy. Mark had always had terrible penmanship, scrawling like a doctor in a rush. But this time, the ink was blotchy, as if he had paused many times, or as if a drop of water or a tear had hit the page. Mom, it read, I don't know if you will read this. I don't deserve for you to read this. But I needed to say it. I am not writing to ask for money. I am not writing to ask for the house. I am writing because, yesterday, I saw a woman on the bus who looked like you from behind, and I realized I might never see your face again. I took a sip of my tea. It was warm, grounding me. I am working at a warehouse now, the letter continued. It's hard. My back hurts every day. But for the first time in my life, I sleep at night. Because I know I earned that sleep. Mom, I miss the way you used to look at me before I became a monster. I want to see that look again. Even just for a minute. I will be at the old park on Maple Street at noon on Sunday. The bench near the swings where you used to push me. If you don't come, I understand. I will just sit there and remember when we were happy. I folded the letter. I looked at the clock. It was 10 a.m. I dressed simply. No power suit today. No diamonds. Just a warm wool coat and a scarf. I told my driver to stay home. I called a cab. The park on Maple Street hadn't changed much. The swings were a bit rusty. The oak trees were thicker, their branches reaching wider than I remembered. I saw him from a distance. He was sitting on the wooden bench, hunched forward, elbows on his knees. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was just looking at the ground, watching the ants in the dirt. He looked thinner. His hair was graying at the temples. Stress does that faster than age. He wore work boots that were scuffed and muddy. I walked toward him. The leaves crunched under my boots. Crunch. Crunch. He lifted his head. When he saw me, he stood up quickly, clumsily, like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. "Mom," he whispered. The wind carried his voice to me. It was fragile. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just walked until I was standing right in front of him. "Hello, Mark," I said. He looked at me, searching my face for anger. He didn't find it. But he didn't find the old pushover, Evelyn, either. He found a woman who was whole. I didn't think you'd come," he stammered. He didn't know what to do with his hands, so he shoved them into his pockets. "I read your letter," I said. "It's true," he said quickly. "Everything in it. I don't want anything, Mom. I swear. Jessica. She's gone. And I'm glad." It took losing everything to realize she was the most expensive thing in my life. He took a shaky breath. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, for the Thanksgiving dinner. For the lies. For the dog." He choked on the last word. Tears welled up in his eyes, spilling over without shame. "I treated you like an object," he cried. "I'm so sorry." He fell silent, hanging his head. I looked at my son. I saw the remorse. It wasn't the panic of a man losing his wallet. It was the grief of a man who had lost his soul and was trying to find it again in the dirt. I stepped forward. I opened my arms. "Come here," I said softly. Mark collapsed into my embrace. He hugged me so tight I could feel his ribs. He buried his face in my shoulder, sobbing like he was 5 years old and had scraped his knee. I held him. I stroked the back of his head. "I forgive you, Mark," I whispered. He cried harder. "But," I said, pulling back slightly so I could look him in the eye, "forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. And it is certainly not the same as a bank transfer." Mark wiped his eyes with his sleeve. He nodded vigorously. "I know. I don't want your money. I don't want a dime." "Good," I said. "Because you aren't getting it. The trust is gone, Mark. It belongs to the foundation now. The house is sold. The money is serving people who need it." "I understand," he said. And for the first time, I believed him. "However," I continued, "I can help you in a different way." Mark looked up. "How?" "The foundation owns several apartment buildings for low-income seniors," I explained. "They need maintenance. They need someone to paint walls, fix leaky faucets, and shovel snow in the winter. It is hard work. It pays $18 an hour." I paused. I spoke to the building manager. "There is an opening for a janitor. If you want it." Mark looked at me. A year ago, he would have scoffed. He would have been insulted. He would have asked where his corner office was. But today, Mark smiled. It was a genuine, weary, grateful smile. "I'll take it," he said. "I'm pretty good at shoveling snow." "Good," I said. "Report to Mr. Henderson on Monday at 7 a.m. Don't be late. If you are late, you are fired." "I won't save you." "I won't be late," he promised. We sat on the bench for a while. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about Jessica. We talked about the weather. We talked about the birds. When the sun began to set, I stood up. Can I walk you to your cab?" Mark asked. "Yes," I said. He walked me to the curb. He opened the door for me. He didn't ask for a ride. He didn't ask for cash for the bus. "See you, Mom," he waved. "See you, Mark." Life has a way of settling into a new rhythm. Mark has been working for the foundation for 3 months now. Mr. Henderson tells me he is the hardest worker on the crew. He fixes the seniors' radiators and listens to their stories. They like him. They bring him cookies. He rents a small 1-bedroom apartment. It is clean. He pays for it himself. He comes to the penthouse every other Sunday for dinner. He brings dessert. Usually a box of donuts from a bakery near his work. He pays for them. We sit on the balcony. We drink tea. Our relationship is not what it used to be. The crack is still there. You can glue a broken vase back together, but you will always see the lines where it shattered. But I have learned to love the cracks. They are proof that we survived. They are proof that we are real. Mark is no longer my baby. He is a man. A man who is finally growing up, 30 years late. And I am no longer his ATM. I am his mother. As I sit here, watching the sunset reflect off the glass buildings of Chicago, I want to say one last thing to you, to every mother who is listening, to every parent who feels like they are drowning in their own sacrifice. We are taught that love means giving everything. We are taught to cut off pieces of ourselves to keep our children warm. But I am telling you now, stop. Love is not about setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. If you give your children everything, you steal their ability to make something of themselves. If you shield them from every storm, they will never learn to build a shelter. Keep your house. I don't just mean your physical house. I mean the house of your soul. Keep your dignity, keep your boundaries, keep your retirement fund. Because only when you respect yourself will they learn to respect you. Love them with a warm heart, yes, but love them with a cool head. I take a sip of my chamomile tea. Down below, on the street, I see a foundation truck drive by. I know Mark is in the passenger seat, tired, dirty, and probably hungry. I smile. He will be fine, and for the first time in a long time, so will I. The story you just heard has had its names and locations changed to protect the identities of those involved. We're not sharing this to judge anyone, but in the hope that someone out there will pause and reflect, how many mothers are silently suffering in their own homes? Honestly, I wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you speak up and fight to reclaim your voice? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this story from Grandma's Secrets, or any feedback you have that could help us make our content even better. God always blesses the brave, and I truly believe courage leads us toward better days. For now, I'm leaving two of the most loved stories from our channel on the end screen. I think they'll surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this very moment. If this story touched your heart, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss what's coming next.